Okay, we're going to look at our seventh memory verse, Ephesians 6, 7, and 8. Something very interesting about this memory verse, many of the verses that we've had so far make sense without actually knowing the context real well, because we're familiar with the context of those verses. They're from passages that we've studied, and then the context of the memory verse itself just lends to understanding it. But this verse is a good one in that we need to think of the context as we look at it. And so if quickly looking at the context, Ephesians chapter 6, 1 to 3 is commands to children. And then 6:4 is to fathers. 6:5 to 8 is to servants or slaves. And we want to remember that in the first century there was a lot of slavery. Okay? And even believers were slaves, and even believers had slaves, right? And then 6:9 is command to masters, and 6:10 to 20 is to all believers. And so our passage ends up in the passage talking to the slaves. And so we need to know that. Okay, so then it starts out with the phrase, with goodwill doing service. So first let's discuss doing service. Okay, doing service uses the verb for being a slave, and it's has the idea of performing the duties of a slave, and it's usually talking about a lower status person. Now remember, the slaves during the first century were often prisoners who were captive and then sold into slavery, and so they had a lot of talents. Right? So Paul is speaking to the slaves, and he says, with goodwill doing service. Now the goodwill is important, and the idea of goodwill here has the idea of with a good attitude. So it's coming from the heart. This service, this work that they're doing is coming from the heart. It's willingly. So with goodwill doing service. So it's telling the slaves that they should obey their masters and they should do a good job. And then it tells how. As to the Lord. So here it's telling the slave he is supposed to commit his life and his work as if he was doing it for the Lord and not to men. And so that's an important thing. So we're going to learn a principle from here that we can apply to ourselves. Right? Imagine how much more you and I should do our service to someone who's paying us with a good attitude and willingness of heart, and doing it to the Lord and not to men and not for the money, but as pleasing to the Lord. Now, the next phrase is really important because it's going to drive the principle home. All right? Knowing, so this is something that is known, that whatsoever good thing, so this idea of a good thing, right, is anything within the Christian life or anybody's life that's good. It's working hard, it's producing more, it's anything of that nature. So knowing that whatsoever good thing, and this is the phrase that I think is very important, any man doeth, right? So a slave or a free man. All right, knowing that whatever good thing, now he's broadening his audience. It's no longer just a slave, but it's a slave and or a free man. So if one is truly free, then he's going to do that much more good things, right? We're going to produce. So it's any man. And then it goes on, the same shall he receive of the Lord. The idea being, whatsoever you do to someone, you'll receive it back. And so we're doing it for the Lord, so we're going to receive it from the Lord. And that's a principle, again, I think often in the New Testament, when we see blessing, we always want to go to spiritual blessings first. Okay? There is not a key to getting material wealth. Wealth isn't something that should be important in the life of the believer, but it's the spiritual blessing and the knowledge that we'll spend eternity with Christ. And so, knowing that whatsoever good thing any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord. And look at the last phrase, whether he be bond or free, whether he be a slave or whether he's free. So we have bond or free, we have any man, and we start out with doing service or being a slave. So the principle that's given to the slave, that he is to work extra hard as to the Lord and not to men, is a principle given to all believers. Because whether you're bond or free, it's to all of us. And we need to make sure that when we do our work, when we are responsible to do certain things, that we do it as to the Lord and not to men. We're not looking to be eye pleasers, right? We're looking to please the Lord. Wonderful verse.